Hello everyone and welcome to Multiplying and Dividing Fractions. Today we're going to be focusing on multiplying fractions, and then tomorrow we're really going to be digging into dividing fractions. Last week we talked about and worked on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So today we're going to be working on multiplying fractions. So if you do not already have a weekly workbook, make sure you get one. Put your first and last name along with your period and the date at the top. We will be taking notes on the next slide, and there is a page in your weekly workbook after you put your name, first and last name, and your period on the top. You can turn open to the first page and you'll see a page that says notes. I would like you to take notes throughout this recording to make sure that you have it for your availability when there's homework or if you need to go back and look at them and to study them. These would be a good resource for you guys to use. The first thing I want you to put in your notes is your math vocabulary. I have a few words that I would like to add to your math vocabulary. Your first word is mixed number, which is a whole number and fraction combined. So in the example, you see 2 and 1/3. It's also called a mixed fraction. So if you see mixed number or mixed fraction, they both mean the same thing. And then I know we talked about improper fractions a little bit last week when we were adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. But just as a reminder, improper fraction is where the numerator is the greater number and then the denominator is the smaller number. So in the example, you have 9/5. When you have an improper fraction, you always have to simplify it back into a mixed number. It cannot stay that way. So we have to make it proper again, and that is turning it into a mixed number. So in this case, turning 9/5 into a mixed number would be 1 as your whole number, 4 as your numerator, and then your denominator would just carry over from your improper fraction, which would be 5. So it would be 1 4/5 as your mixed number. So make sure when you have an improper fraction that you always turn it back into a mixed number. Again, you can pause this video at any time, so if I'm going too fast and you haven't really wrote down in your notes yet the math vocabulary, you can always pause it and then it will pick up right where you left off when you hit the play button. So go ahead and pause it if you need to so that you can get down the notes. Now we're moving on to our mental math time. I'm going to be adding these in throughout the year. Mental math time is a time where you will just use your brains only. You do not need to use a calculator. You do not need to use a calculator on your Chromebook, and you do not need to use a pencil and paper. So I want you to take some time right now. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do these problems mentally in your head, and then we will check our answers in just a few minutes. So go ahead and pause the video and then see if we can work out these problems using your brain. These are the mental math time answers. So again, 4.5 times 5, since you have a whole number, you don't have to worry about lining up any decimals. And again, in multiplication, you don't have to line up the decimals. You always have to put the decimal at the end and back into your answer at the end once you get your answer. So 4.5 times 5 would give you 22.5. For our second one, you would notice that 21/7 is indeed an improper fraction. So we always have to change that improper fraction back into a mixed number. In this case, sometimes improper fractions actually come out as whole numbers. So 7 can go into 21 3 whole times. So that's how they got the 3. And then 7 can go into 7 1 whole time. So instead of writing the fraction 3/1, we can just write it and keep it as the numerator of 3 as a whole number. Because we know that any whole number, the fraction of that number is always going to be over 1. And then we have 15.2 plus 2.3. And again, you always have to add and line up your decimals. So when you're adding decimals, you always have to line them up. Same with subtraction. So go ahead, you would have to line up 15.2 plus 2.3, and that would give you 17.5. So those are your answers to the mental math time. Again, we will be working on this throughout the year and building those skills. So be patient with yourselves. Again, it's okay to make mistakes in math as long as we learn and correct them. And it will take us some time to master some of these skills, so give yourselves that time. Your I can statement for today is I can solve multiplying. and dividing fractions by identifying all the steps and showing my work. So that today is what we're going to really be focusing on, is the multiplying factor of it. You also are going to be showing how you add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators by applying the different methods. So I know last week we worked on the four-square method and the butterfly method, so those are going to come into play throughout your work during this weekly workbook and during multiplying and dividing fractions. But today we're really just going to be focusing on the multiplying parts. We want to get those steps down so that we can work towards mastering that skill. So again, in your notes, I would like you to take these notes down. These are the steps onto multiplying fractions. Your first step that you're going to put down is you're going to multiply the numerators, and that's multiplying straight across. So as you can see, they multiplied 2 times 3, which gave them 6 as their new numerator. And then we multiply the denominators, 5 times 4, and again, that gave them the new denominator of 20. So multiplying fractions I kind of find is easier because you don't have to find the unlike denominator. So you just have to worry about multiplying the numbers and making sure your multiplication comes out correct, and then simplifying and reducing at the end. So you can see right here it says reduce the fraction if necessary. Again, reduce just means to simplify if you can. And in this case they could, because these numbers are both even, so we know that they're both divisible by 2. So they did that by 2 and they got 3 and 10. So they got 3 over 10 as their final answer. Again, over here off to the side, you can also see you can simplify before you multiply straight across. So you can actually bring step 3 up to step 1, and this becomes step 2, and this becomes step 3. So, and I can kind of show you how to do that. So let me go ahead and get out my pen. So what I mean by cross simplifying before you multiply straight across is you have to look at your numbers straight across from each other. So the first number that we're going to look at is this 2 and this 4. So we have to think, okay, is 2 and 4, are they divisible by any number that is the same? And you would say yes, because they're both divisible by 2. So 2 can go into 4. So 2 goes into 2 one whole time. So 2 is now no longer 2, it is 1. And then 2 goes into 4 2 times. So 4 is no longer 4, it is 2. Okay, so again, you can cross simplify so you don't have to leave it as your third step, and it can actually become your first step. And it does make it a lot easier when you have bigger numbers. Cross simplifying, that way you can get it out of the way and you don't have to worry about it after you multiply at the end. And it becomes better for you in a sense that I have found, because sometimes I get going a little too fast and I forget to simplify at the end, so that is not exactly the correct answer. So if you are one of those kind of workers where you're like just kind of zooming along and you don't really go back and check your work, which I hope and pray you do, but sometimes we get a little fast and that doesn't happen. So in this case, cross simplifying before you even multiply straight across would come in handy. So then you have to think, okay, can 5 go into 3, or can 3 go into 5? Or are they divisible by any other number that is the same? And that would be no. So when you can't do it, then you just leave those numbers the same. So then we have 1/5 times 3 over 2. And if you multiply straight across, then you will see that it comes out exactly like our simplified answer at the bottom. Okay, so it's just another way to look at it. Whichever way that you're more comfortable doing, go ahead and do it that way. So if you're more comfortable with simplifying at the very last step, then you can go ahead and do it that way. But if you're more comfortable cross simplifying and then just multiplying straight across, that way you don't have to worry about it at the end, you can also do it that way. So go ahead and put these in your notes and make sure that you get them down. Again, you can pause this video at any time. So let's go ahead and try some together. So we have 7/8 times 10 over 21. And as you can see, these are pretty big numbers. And I know that when we multiply straight across, we're going to even get bigger numbers. So in that case, I would think to myself, okay, I don't really like working with bigger numbers. I like working with smaller numbers because they're easier, right? So in this case, I'm going to cross simplify before I even start multiplying straight across. So I'm going to see if 7 can go into 21, or if 7 and 21 have a divisible number that they share. So you can think to yourself, okay, can 7 go into 21? And in this case, it can. So 7 and 21 are divisible by 7. So 7 can go into 7 one whole time. So that 7 turns into a 1, and then 7 can go into 21 3 whole times evenly. So that 21 is now a 3. And then I'm going to check my other numbers and see if I can cross simplify them. So is 8 and 10, do they share a number that is divisible? And I would think to myself, yeah, 2 can go into 8 and 2 can go into 10. So we're going to go ahead and simplify those. So 2 can go into 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 4 whole times. And then 2 can go into 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 5 whole times. So now my new fractions are 1 over 4 times 5 over 3. And I just took that last step out of simplifying and reducing because I already did it. So now I can just multiply straight across and I don't have to worry about simplifying at the end. And I'm working with smaller fractions and smaller numbers. So 1 times 5 is 5. And 4 times 3 is 3, 6, 9, 12 is 12. So then right there is my answer. I don't have to worry about reducing it or simplifying it because I already did that in my first step. So 5/12 would be your final answer. So again, make sure you're getting these down in your notes as your practice problems. So if you need to label, practice problems at the top, make sure you do that. Same with 5/12 times 7 over 16. Again, if I do 12 times 16, I'm going to get a pretty big answer. And I don't like working with big numbers. So again, I'm going to see if I can cross simplify. So is there a number that can go into 5 and that can go into 16 that is the same? And then we have to think to ourselves that question. And in this case, there isn't. So 5 and 16 have to stay those numbers because there isn't one that can go into it. And same with 7 and 12. Is there a number that can go into 7 and 12? And you have to kind of think to yourselves, is there a number that's divisible by both 7 and by both 12 that is the same? And in this case, there isn't, so we can't cross simplify. So we just have to go ahead and multiply straight across. So then 5 times 7 gives me 35. And then 12 times 16 gives me 192. Okay, so when you can't cross simplify and there's not a number that goes into both of those, you can guarantee that the fraction that you get as your answer is already going to be simplified down to its lowest terms. So in this case, we have 35 over 192. Again, 35 is an odd number and 192 is an even number, so it's already in its simplest form. Because the only number that is going to be able to go into both of those that's the same is 1. So now that we've tried a couple practice together, and I hope you got those examples down in your notes, we're going to go ahead and move on. Again, you can pause this video at any time if I'm going too fast, or if you want to re-listen to it to make sure that you get the steps correct, you can always rewind it as well. So go ahead and pause the video right where it is, and I want you to get these down in your notes. These again are some practice problems for you, so go ahead and put these down in your notes and see if you can work them out. And then I will be walking around and helping you at the same time as you're watching the video that I'm doing for you guys. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask and we can go ahead and work out a few of these. But I want you to go ahead independently to see if you can work out these problems on your own. Now that you've worked out those problems on your own, I hope it's the steps are kind of making more sense. But then you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, well, Miss Rotoball, we've talked about just regular fractions, but what happens if the fraction is indeed a mixed number that they want you to multiply together? And right here you can tell the step that you would have to add is to convert them into an improper fraction before you even start multiplying and before you even start adding those steps in. So for example, you have 4 1/2 times 6 2/5. Again, these are both, mixed numbers. So in order to multiply them, we have to turn them back into improper fractions. And the way to do that is you're always going to multiply your whole number by your denominator. and then you're always going to add that number to your numerator. So 4 times 2 gives you 8, plus 1 gives you 9. So then 9 would become your new numerator, and then you would just carry over your denominator that you already had, which would be 2. So then 4 and 1/2 is now 9 over 2 as a improper fraction. And then we're multiplying. Again, make sure you get these down in your notes. These would be good notes for you guys to have, just in case you're not really understanding quite yet. Okay, so that you have them down for examples. Again, with 6 and 2/5, we have to change it into an improper fraction, so we're always going to multiply the whole number by the denominator and then add the numerator to it. So 6 times 5 gives us 30, plus 2 gives us 32. So then we have 32 over, we carry our denominator over, which is 5. And then you guys are ready, and you're going to use the same steps to go ahead and either multiply straight across and then simplify, or you can cross simplify and then multiply straight across. So again, when you have mixed numbers, you just have to make sure that you add that extra step in to change them back into improper fractions before you multiply. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Again, your turn. So go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to go ahead in your notes and do these problems. Again, I will be walking around the classroom, so if you do need some guidance or just a reminder, I will be there to help, so just raise your hand if you need that. So go ahead and pause the video and work out these problems. All right, now that you've worked out those last 2 practice problems, that is all that I have for you guys today with multiplying fractions. So tomorrow we will be introducing how to find quotients to fractions, which, remember, quotients is just the answer to a division problem. Almost said multiplication, crazy. It's the answer to a division problem. So we will be introducing those fractions, how to divide them, and the steps that we need to take. So now what I want you to do is log into Canvas and see what's next on your math agenda so that we can get that step accomplished. I will talk to you and see you all tomorrow.